in my opinion, that's the missing piece of the blockchain puzzle. It's why blockchain is not getting mass adoption. It's why blockchain is not becoming mainstream. It's why we're not seeing that original cypherpunk vision of having having the world's assets on a single distributed network, of having programmable money. Why we've not achieved that? It's because you need identity, and you need privacy to get identity.
Welcome to Study Lads. In this episode, I interview Zac from Aztec. Aztec is a layer 2 privacy network that I'm really excited about because privacy on chain opens up an entire world of use cases and possibilities. In this episode, we talk about ZK proofs and how they enable crazy use cases that can change the world. Privacy on chain and why it's not only needed but necessary. Aztec and their crazy ambitious vision for how they want to just dominate and conquer the world, and a ton more. Let's get to it. Can you give me like a overview, big picture of like what is Aztec?
We are a layer 2 built on top of Ethereum, where private state is a first-class primitive. And what that enables is strong privacy guarantees for users, for applications. Effectively, we are recreating a smart contract style ecosystem as a layer 2 on Ethereum, where you have hidden information and private data within your smart contracts.
So when you say private data or like privacy, what sort of apps or things would it actually enable for the end user? Is it like, like right now in crypto, everything's transparent, right? If somebody finds my crypto address, which is pretty easy to find, they can see everything I've ever bought, everything I hold. It's just like it's like if your bank account was open for everyone. Is it like it hides stuff like that? Is it like private swaps? What kind of apps or like abilities does this enable for the end user?
Yes. So yeah, we don't want to like just enable TradFi on chain with all the old problems that TradFi has. Like that's not useful. Aztec's building a hybrid system. The idea is that you have a smart contract that's made of functions. Those functions can be public functions or private functions. Private ones will modify private state, public ones will modify public state, and functions can call each other. And so you can build these hybrid systems where some things you can hide, some things you don't hide. There is a phrase which is going to become, I think, very common over the next 2 years, which is privacy for the user, transparency for the protocol. As in, if I'm interacting with a marketplace, I want maximum information transparency about that marketplace. So then I know that I'm getting that market is efficient, that I'm not getting ripped off. At the same time, I don't want to show the world who I am. I don't want to say, like Zac is, like trading degenerate like Milady NFTs on OpenSea. I want my information to be hidden, but I want the market's information to be public and transparent. And you can do that with these kinds of hybrid systems very efficiently. Okay. So yeah, I think you can have your cake and eat it.
And just to explain maybe for the average person, what we're talking about and what he's saying is that for like DeFi and these things on chain, it's really useful to know like that a protocol is holding the amount that they say they're holding and that they're doing the things with the funds that they say they're doing. The problem with FTX is they weren't doing the things that they were supposed to be doing with the funds, and you couldn't see that. But in DeFi, you can always see it. And so removing that function is actually kind of scary because, then we do kind of get almost this bank-like system, and we don't want that. And so what he's saying is with Aztec, you don't have to remove that. Like you have that still for the protocols, but as a user, you can be private. And privacy, some people get to say that's a scary thing, and governments like to associate that with like all these bad things. But in reality, like privacy is a human right. It's a normal thing. Like you have privacy with your bank account. Privacy has been like the standard with finances for all of history for people. And so it's just enabling what we've had for all time, but on the blockchain, which is a new thing, and it's a cool thing. So is that a good way to sum it up?
It's brilliant. Yes. Thank you for translating. And what you're saying about privacy being like an essential human right is it's so important. I mean, imagine if every time you used an ATM, you got cash out of an ATM, that ATM screamed to the entire street how much you were taking out and how much was in your account. You wouldn't use that ATM.
No.
How many people are comfortable like telling everyone how much money they have, or like what they earn, or what the size of their mortgage? Like, no. Like, what is a man but a miserable pile of secrets? I can't remember who said that, but it struck home to me. As in, we have our public face and we have our private, like what we show to the world, and then we have the enormity of all of the thoughts and experiences that are going on inside our head, of which like our public visage is just a superficial component. And by forcing everyone to be transparent, to be open, all you're doing is you're lobotomizing a human being, because you're just saying that the only thing about you is that skin deep superficial layer, and that's the pressure that's being placed upon us by the existing, well, at least the way that existing financial systems are going, where we're getting rid of cash. Blockchains are completely transparent on the whole, and we even have central banks talking about we'll make a centralized blockchain where we can see everything about everyone, and if you're not free to spend your own money, your own resources, however you see fit, then that's a freedom issue. Because money, what is money? Money is commodified human agency. You can get somebody to do something they don't want to do by giving them money that you want to do. And if you can't spend your money freely, then it's a restriction on your agency, on your liberty. And obviously this logic breaks down in the extremes, because I'm not saying I should be able to buy mercenaries and take down my competitors, but you move away from the extremes, and I think it's a very valid point.
Well, I think crypto is supposed to be, the whole thing is like, we want it to be government resistant on some level, right? Censorship resistant. But when you don't have privacy, like it's actually very easy to censor. Like it's very easy for the government to target you and say, hey, you are using this. We don't want you using this. And then like, you're just not allowed to, and it's gone, right? Like where if, maybe you have an oppressive government, think of, maybe a not so good government, and they're trying to stop their citizens from using crypto because, they want to stranglehold them. If it's private, they could still be using it and the government just doesn't know, right? Like, and in that case, for those users, that's a useful tool, right? And so, but it's very censorable when you don't have privacy, and you don't get a bunch of use cases like data, like health records on chain, or like there's a lot of TradFi things that can't come on chain because of that lack of privacy. And so
it's really more than a lot.
Yeah,
it's a universe of assets. As in, let's think about where's the value derived from in blockchain at the moment. There's a lot of money involved in blockchain, but where's it derived from? There's only two sources. There's the value of the native consensus token of that cryptocurrency network. So what people are willing to pay for a single source of truth, and dollar-backed stablecoins like USDC. And there is nothing else. If the price of Ethereum went to zero, every single asset except USDC would go to zero. How limiting is that? And how damning is that in terms of how utterly blockchains fail to reach into the lives of people in the real world if there is no real value on a blockchain? And the reason for that is because of a lack of identity. It's not necessarily privacy, it's identity. If I want to have some kind of digital record of an asset, it could be a piece of property, it could be a loan, it could be a ship, it could be my Pokemon card collection. Then you need to say who owns it. And if you don't have privacy, you can't have meaningful identity on chain, because of the outrageous privacy risks and security risks that creates. And so in my opinion, that's the missing piece of the blockchain puzzle. It's why blockchain is not getting mass adoption. It's why blockchain is not becoming mainstream. It's why we're not seeing that original cypherpunk vision of having the world's assets on a single distributed network, of having programmable money. Why we've not achieved that? It's because you need identity, and you need privacy to get identity.
I was just listening to a podcast where this guy had money in his bank account taken out by the state. And I actually have had that with my father-in-law, where they said he owed taxes and they just took the money from his account, and it caused him to default on this other debt. And so it's crazy that your money in your bank account isn't you don't have property rights over that. You don't control that. The government actually can take it at any point that they want. But in crypto, you do have property rights over that. But like you said, you can't really use it as a bank account at the moment. And there's so many different things you can't do because of the lack of privacy. I was going to ask you, I know there are things like KYC, etc. The government tries to do to stop terrorism. Is, in my opinion, not actually a very good system. It's like very burdensome for a lot of these banks, etc. And it doesn't really do a good job at actually accomplishing the thing it's supposed to do. Like they're still doing these things. Would it be possible with something like zero knowledge proofs or something like that, like abstractly, just asking, to be able to like prove like, hey, like these funds were used for like a good thing, or these funds were not used for illicit activities, or
Absolutely.
yes.
Yes, and it's very important for us that this is possible because, we want to ensure that people building on top of the Aztec network can remain compliant within their jurisdiction. Within reason. We want to ensure that, the network is completely neutral, impartial, permissionless, but that people building on top of it, they get to decide for themselves what levels of like identity or credentials checks or KYC checks they want to apply for their application. And so when it comes to things like, am I goody or am I baddie? Well, there's loads of solution techniques to that. One of them is the simplest one is basically things like preemptive KYC. So passports, for example, passports these days, they have chips in them where they'll sign a digital signature, and your phone has a scanner on it which will trigger one of these signatures, and you can make a zero knowledge proof that proves that you have signed a message from a passport of a specific nationality, and so you can use that to create a zero knowledge proof of identity. So you can say, yes, I at the very least have a passport. I'm in possession of a passport issued by the United Kingdom, and the name is Zac Williamson. Like obviously, you all you know is that I own the passport, but that's pretty strong. That's usually good enough, in the traditional world. If you go to a website and you upload a picture of your passport, they don't go, "Oh, is this your passport?" So you can already match existing real world functions. You can exceed them in many ways because the entire compliance regime of TradFi. And one of the reasons why it's so inefficient, it's retroactive. The idea is that you perform the transaction and then later on you file all the paperwork that shows, yes, everything is on board, I'm not on a sanctions list, blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't work. So much money is laundered through traditional banks. It's orders and orders of magnitude more than blockchain. And with blockchain, you can do preemptive compliance. You can say, oh right, in order for this transaction to be valid, by definition, you must have a signature. You must have signed this transaction from a passport that's not on a sanctions list. You must prove that your overall spending is lower than a certain threshold. You can have all of these logical checks that reach into the real world through credentials like identities that have to be satisfied before the transaction can even happen at all. And so it's moving the compliance regime from one which is retroactive to one which is preemptive.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but with something like zero knowledge, you could actually prove that, hey, you're not using this for illicit, something illicit. You're from this country. You have all the proper credentials to be able to do this without actually having to give away who you are.
Yes, exactly.
That's amazing. That's just so cool to me. And I think in crypto we could build a better KYC that actually does its job, right? Because nobody in crypto wants to fund terrorism or all this bad stuff. So I think we could build almost a better version of that actually is effective, that doesn't have this huge regulatory burden, and hopefully we can.
I do think it needs to be attempted.
Yeah,
I think that, it's and the Aztec network is an ideal place for that to be built as a higher level standards, I just want to clarify and just hammer home, the network itself is permissionless, and so we want to make sure that these solutions can be built but not mandated. It's going to be interesting to see how the future plays out, because the way I see it, regulators often they wear two faces. You have the de jure legal mandate of the regulator, which is going to be to protect consumers and perhaps protect national security interests. And I think we can all agree, largely, especially when it comes to protecting users, that's a very legitimate purpose. No one wants to get ripped off. No one wants to get scammed. I would argue that they have another kind of de facto mandate, which is really the protection of the privileges of the economic elites of that society. And I know that sounds conspiratorial, but you get that effect through just natural network effects, because if you take a regulator like the SEC, where do the where does the expertise within that organization come from? Well, it comes from financial institutions. TradFi. You have an enormous feedback loop between the interests of traditional finance and the interests of regulators, where it's a very symbiotic relationship. And then some new technology comes rocking up and goes, "Hey, I don't need you anymore. We're more efficient. We're going to take we're going to take your business. We're going to take your jobs. We're going to take your money." And suddenly, all of the people within that regulatory agency, well, you're basically saying to them, like, the caste of people that you belong to are no longer required. They're not going to like that. They're going to push back, even if you can still fulfill the de jure mandate, and you can show that yes, you're protecting against fraud, you're protecting against bad actors, you're protecting users. I don't think that's going to be good enough, to be honest, just because of the natural just human dynamics. I think you're starting to, this is kind of why, right? Crypto's become politicized in America. Why you have the SEC acting in apparently unlawfully ways. If you believe the latest the Bitcoin ETF ruling.
Yeah.
It's political, and so we want to make sure that Aztec has the moral legitimacy. Because we need that to fight this coming battle, which is to establish that this is a legitimate, valuable part of the world's financial ecosystem. That permissionless, private, privacy-preserving blockchain networks bring something new to the table that's extremely valuable and beneficial for mankind.
I agree. I 100% agree with everything you said. The regulatory capture in the U.S., especially, I think it's a lot easier to see for people when you look at the military industrial machine and how much that gets pumped up in a very specific way because of that feedback loop that you're describing earlier. It's just kind of a natural kind of those network effects as they grow. And so you have a similar thing with banking, finance, et cetera. And it is kind of a battle of this new technology having to deal with the problems that come inherently with being a new technology, right? There's always just a ton of surface area for scams because, we haven't figured that out. Same thing with the internet. When it first came out, there was a ton of scams with the internet. And we figured those things out, viruses, the Nigerian prince that used to email everyone, those things got sorted out, and we're sorting out in crypto, but it just gives a ton of surface area of attack for governments. And they already have that incentive to attack. And I think, but something maybe that is a big disruptor in the system already, that I've already been seeing, is AI, where you have these people creating fake IDs using AI, and they're faking these pictures to get past KYC processes. And I've seen it even for crypto, where people are like, "Oh yeah, if you want to sign up for X exchange, here's what you do." And it's that easy, to the point that the average user is able to fake a lot of these verification processes online using fake IDs and AI, which is crazy. So we do need something better.
Yeah, we do. Jesse, can I do a shout out to people listening to this podcast?
Yeah.
So I've got $1 billion idea for anyone who wants to take it on. So Aztec has a programming language called Noir. It's standalone and it takes high-level programs, turns them into ZK proofs. You can use Noir to do things like verify the correctness of passport signatures. You can do things. In Noir, you can create proofs that verify signatures from bank cards, and you can trigger these signatures from your phone. So right now there is going to be a skyrocketing demand for AI proof identity checks in Web 2, and ZK is the solution, and Noir is the leading technology that you can use to build it. If I was not already knee-deep in Aztec, and if I was starting again from scratch and thinking what's an interesting idea to do, that's what I would do right now today.
Can you go into what is Aztec Noir?
So sorry, Noir is a language that we built for Aztec. It's a public good. It's kind of
like
we wouldn't
Rust,
have built it with Aztec.
All that kind of stuff.
It's a Rust-like language. Yes, a standalone programming language that looks like Rust. And when you compile programs written in Noir, they get converted into zero-knowledge circuits. By that, I mean you can construct proofs that you run a program correctly, and you get to hide, and you can choose which inputs and outputs of that program to hide. All of them, none of them, some of them, and then you can very efficiently verify that proof is correct. And so we are intending to use Noir to be the smart contract programming language for Aztec. So the idea is you can write smart contracts involved with these private and public functions. But you can also just write standalone programs that do things like, verify signatures coming from various devices. And you can do that whilst the value of doing that in Noir is that it means you can scrub sensitive information. So, for example, if I have a passport signature, that's got all sorts of stuff in it, like that proof of passport ownership. It's got my name, my date of birth, my passport number, my nationality, etc. So much information. What you want to do is go, okay, well, here's a valid signature. It came from a UK passport, and I'm going to just hide all the other information. Things like that. That's why zero knowledge is useful.
So it's like a privacy coding language almost, so that on the code side, like nobody's able to see that information, and you're able to. It's kind of like you're proving it without showing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So imagine you're signing up for imagine a cryptocurrency exchange, and it's like we need to know that you're a US citizen or a UK citizen. Like right now, you just give them a photograph of your passport. You could use this. You could give them a zero knowledge proof, and that proof is basically saying, yeah. I've got a passport. I'm not going to tell you who I am, but I tell you I've got a US passport. So it's much more. It's a much stronger guarantee because it can't be manipulated by AI. Because those digital signatures, they're coming from private keys public keys that have been like the issuing authority for those keys is a government. So it's and you can't fake cryptographic signatures with AI. So it's a much more ironclad way of doing identity checks.
Zero knowledge is so cool. Like the more I've been getting into it, the more I'm like, this is crazy. Like every time I have to go to file some tax thing, I have to give my social security number, and we have so much identity theft. Imagine a world where you never had to share that information, and you could always prove that information without sharing it. Like, imagine how low identity theft and all these things, all these data breaches, right? With these websites where your data is stored and you lose all that data, and somebody, farms it out somewhere, whatever. Your password, there's so many different things and uses for zero knowledge proofs that I think that's a massive innovation, even outside of just crypto, AI, etc. I think there's this whole world of things, especially in a world, an AI-enabled world, that ZK is going to enable and change about how we do life. I'm really excited about.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm excited too. I think we're going to over the next 10 years, we're going to see a great change in how we interact online because of what zero knowledge proofs enable. Change which is not going to be enjoyed by many organizations, because here's an interesting thing you can do with zero knowledge. They're called ZK middle boxes. So right now, the internet as we know it, it's okay. Maybe let's not. I'm not going to start there. Are you familiar with the Oracle problem in Web3?
Maybe explain it a little bit.
Yeah. So the Oracle problem is basically, you can't really trust on-chain oracles. As in, if I want to get information from the real world, I need that relayed by some third party that's going to have a multisig, and I need to trust that multisig. So you're adding another link in the chain. So if I want to say get, I don't know, the weather forecast from the US Weather Service, or I want to get that in on chain, I got to rely on somebody, transmitting the information. I got to trust them. It's not trustless. You can create trustless oracles with ZK because the way that if I visit a website like the US Weather Service and I go, hey, what's the weather? The communication channel that is established between my computer and their website server, it's secured by something called TLS, Transport Layer Security. It's basically a bunch of cryptographic protocols that ensure that the sender and recipient of all these messages is who we intend. There's going to be some kind of a certificate authority that validates that. Okay, yeah, this is the US Weather Service, and so if you take that communication history, all there's TLS certificates, there's the proofs, the digital signatures, and you wrap it all in a zero knowledge proof, what you effectively have is a cryptographic proof saying, here's some weather data. I can prove it came from servers controlled by the US Weather Service, and you can put that on chain, and then a smart contract can go, yep, the proof's valid.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. So like something like Chainlink, they have had to build into their system all these different mechanisms to make sure that these Oracle providers are, doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? And they have the reputation. They have sort of like their own version of slashing that happens if they do something bad or a bad actor. And what you're saying is you can like completely almost go around that with something like ZK proofs, because you can just directly with the code prove that, hey, this data did come from here, and you don't have to trust that Oracle provider in the middle.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. A few teams are realizing the value of this and starting to work on it, and it's very hard to do, as in the amount of logic and complexity and mathematics that you need to wrap in a zero-knowledge proof to verify like something as complicated as a TLS protocol. It's very high, which is why we've not seen it yet. But it's our ZK tech has become advanced enough where this is actually possible now, and it's going to happen relatively soon. And we're going to start to see trustless oracles start to migrate on chain.
To just go back, so the average person can understand maybe what Aztec is, I want to kind of circle back sort of to my first question about like what it enables. And I'll try to give you an overview, and you tell me if I'm right. So Aztec is a layer 2. It's like Arbitrum, Optimism, etc. Except for on this layer 2, you have the ability to have private user things. And like this isn't specifically defined as like, it's not like just your transaction balance is private. It's like there's a kind of a world, a sandbox essentially of use cases you can enable on this chain that you're not really saying, hey, it's not like you're just saying, hey, you're going to hide balances, or hey, you're going to hide transfers. You're saying, here are the tools to make private transactions, and just seeing kind of what people are able to build on it. Exactly.
It's like, what do you want to hide, effectively? And you can hide it. So you think of some on-chain dApp application where there's some data that would normally needs to be in the smart contract, but it's sensitive. Well, you can hide it in Aztec. I can give some examples. I mean, like the most basic one is, okay, are you account abstraction? So that's the big talk of the town these days, because Web3 user experience sucks because you have a public key and a private key, and if you lose your private key, well, it sucks to be you. I hope you enjoy getting rugged. So account abstraction is a much better way of doing it, where instead of a user being defined by cryptographic keys, it's a smart contract which defines who they are. And so the smart contract can have completely custom authentication logic. It can verify digital signatures, or it could be like a particularly hard game of 20 questions that you only know the answer to, or it could be something more traditional. One thing I'm excited by is using existing WebAuth flows to validate users in Web3. So, for example, how convenient would it be if you could sign in to Web3 with Google or your Apple ID and tie your wallet to those accounts? I mean, for everyday use, that's completely fine. Like most people will trust Google to not leak their private keys, and for small values. But here's the problem, right? Here's the problem. Imagine every single time you send a blockchain transaction, everyone knows that it came from you, Jesse, and your Google account. Like, that's a little bit of a privacy leak. That's a bit of a doxing risk.
That's a huge issue, because then people know exactly what account to target.
Exactly. So that's like the number one low-hanging fruit for privacy. It's like, okay, you have a account abstraction, but it's privacy-preserving account abstraction. So you can verify that Google auth flow, but hide who you are and hide the actual Google ID. You can just basically say, my account has been authorized by basically I am a person with a Google account, and I'm signing in with Google, but I'm not going to tell you anything else. You can intrinsically link that process to an Aztec account.
Or you could do things like, we talked about health records, right? Health records, there's so many laws around that, and because people don't want their identity and their conditions getting out. But you could have a system set up where it's like, here's this person, here's their age, here's where they're born, here's where they live, here is all these things about like their profile, and here's the health conditions they have. And so that's useful data for things like AI, right? As they're trying to like link, okay, maybe what's a common cause of X condition? And they look at thousands of people with all these data points and like, oh my gosh, all these people live in this certain area, or like whatever it is, right? Today you couldn't do that because there's too many, it's very difficult to do, because you got to not reveal those people's identities. while also revealing all that data. And a lot of like, you go to one doctor's office, they might have your data there. You go to a different doctor's office, they don't have that data. And so you could have all these health records online so that every doctor's office you go, they have all your data. But also you could have this data for like, research, et cetera. And all of it is completely private. Nobody can be able to hack it and figure out who you are and all your conditions, while also being able to use that data for useful things. That's something that could be enabled with something like Aztec, right?
It could, absolutely. And it's one of the areas we want to explore more, especially this kind of hybrid between, okay, so reputation systems, right? People talk about them a lot, and it's a similar vein to health records, because it's kind of the information you need to determine somebody's reputation or like credentials it's sensitive, right? Let's say I don't like you. We had a bad experience, and I want to go like, Jesse's a terrible podcaster. I wouldn't want that to be public. But you need, so for a reputation system, you kind of need you need information that's going to be, that people aren't willing to give out if it's public. By the way, that was just a silly example. This is a wonderful experience. And you can create hybrid systems between Web 2 data and Web 3 data. For example, imagine you want to know my creditworthiness on chain. Sure, you could look at all of my history of all of the various lending protocols I've been involved in, and seeing how quickly I repay, etc. But you could combine that with an actual old school Web 2 credit check. You can have a website, like, I don't know the name of a credit check website. Let's say at my bank, I don't know, HSBC. Let's say they give me a credit rating. I could go on chain. I could go, well, my credit rating from HSBC is this, and I can prove it using this trustless oracle. And you can combine that data with the Web 3 native data to create a more well-informed, to perform well-informed analysis on, well, in this case, credit checks, but it can extend to so much more.
All kinds of use cases. That's so cool. As far as Aztec goes, how does it plug into the rest of the layer 2 ecosystem? Because or is it like, hey, if I transfer my funds to Aztec, I can do a bunch of privacy things on Aztec, but then as soon as I leave, now everyone can see me again? The
bog standard Aztec, when we deploy on mainnet, it's going to just be a bog standard L2. So there won't be, you'll be able to bridge trustlessly from Ethereum, but at least on day one, not much else. It's not though that once you withdraw, everything's public again, because you can withdraw to another account, to the one that you deposited in. So, but then there's all sorts of issues associated with that from a compliance perspective. But in theory, you could do that. We'll likely need to build in opt-in tools so that you can prove that whatever you did inside Aztec, you were a good person. And you followed the rules, but yes, you can in theory do that.
This seems like something, I don't know if have you heard of Polygon's aggregator layer? Are you familiar with that?
Vaguely, and I think this is basically the concept of the multi-chain, cross-chain world, isn't it? Yeah.
So with their aggregator layer, it's all based on CK, and basically the way it works, from what I've gathered talking with their team, is that. So at some point this year, it'll go live full version, and you'll be able to transfer between chains within the Polygon ecosystem within sub 5 seconds. So imagine you could go from chain A to chain B. You're bridging. You don't even know you're bridging. It's all abstracted away for the user. But something like this, something like Aztec, seems really useful in a world where bridging is abstracted away, and you have essentially. You're a privacy hub for all these different apps across all these different chains to plug into.
Bingo. So there's a reason I clarified what I just said with day one, because it's hard enough to build this thing, So once we build it, we're going to deploy it. We're not going to hold on to it while we build extra infrastructure. But yes, basically immediately after launch, we are going to work on that multi-chain hypothesis, and we want to get Aztec onto every single network. We want people to be able to bridge into Aztec from every L1 that can support it, every L2. Even L3s if we can, because we want to make Aztec basically like a universal privacy shield for blockchain.
Yeah, because that seems so cool. I could be on an app on whatever chain, and I'm like, hey, I can enable this transaction privately with Aztec, and it's like in the background, maybe it's using cross-chain intents, like who knows what it is, but it's using something to basically go do this swap on Aztec, come back, and now it's privacy shielded or privacy enabled, while also, like you mentioned, being able to prove that I'm not doing something illicit, or we're going to have this whole world of like privacy enabled use cases that, like we talked about earlier, I think will be better. I think will actually enable crypto to maybe get rid of some of the fraud that is in the space, which it's quite small comparatively to what people kind of like blow it out of proportion. But yeah, that's exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited by it too. I mean, there's some fierce technical challenges to building that vision, but it's only a question of when and not if.
What is your vision for like the future of privacy on chain? Like, what do you? I mean, we're just kind of talking about it, but what do you hope ultimately Aztec becomes?
I hope that Aztec becomes the global issuance, trading, and settlements layer for every single asset on the planet.
That's a good vision.
I can explain why I think that is achievable, at least by a privacy network, and it's because right now most assets are completely illiquid. And non-fungible, as in, like the stereotypical example is like a mortgage where the papers are sitting in the basement of a regional bank somewhere. Like that stuff can't get traded. So the only way that you can trade it is by having your issuing bank bundle it together with a lot of other mortgages and creating some package and getting it rated by some corrupted rating agency, and then before you know, you're trading AAA debt that's actually secured by complete junk. That's not efficient. If you have a world where there is established precedent that a on-chain representation of an asset can be legally binding, which is, will take some time to get there, but we'll get there. Then you create a very interesting world when you start to bring all of those assets on into a single chain, because they're all composable and programmable and fungible with one another. So you can create marketplaces for them, and give it, and if the assets, the owners maybe, but the assets themselves are transparent, then you have an enormous amount of information with which to perform reasoned analysis that you just can't do in the current TradFi system, because of these, everything is closed off, everything is hidden away, because that's how these organizations make their margin. And you end up creating very fungible assets, hyper fungible assets, and where they trade efficiently, you have high quality information about their prices. And in that kind of world, you don't need as much liquidity. You don't need as much actual like US dollars or euros to for your financial system to work, because you don't need it as much as a mechanism of exchange, because the assets themselves are partially becoming the mechanism of exchange. And in that kind of world, you start to lose the need for leverage, because the whole purpose of leverage is to create liquidity. That's why the bank will take the tiny amount of deposits in the bank, and they'll create 10x leverage, and dump the systemic risks that they're creating onto the customers. But if everything is liquid, if everything's hyper fungible, then you don't need as much leverage. Which functionally, what does that mean in real terms? It means that the risks of creating leverage will increase, and the expected returns will decrease, which means it'll start to become less viable economically, and that starts to really undermine the fundamental justification for why banks exist in the modern world. I mean, yes, of course they exist to serve people, but that's not what economists care about. They care about leverage. You need leverage in the current system, and you'll always need some leverage, but you'll need less if every asset is on a global. If you have a global marketplace of programmable money that every asset's on, then that's a new world. That's a different world to the one we live in today.
Yeah, I agree. And just to kind of summarize all the kind of like big picture for Aztec, based off of what you said, Aztec, we have a layer 2 right now where it is you have both privacy and non-privacy enabled. So you could have something like FTX on chain prove that user funds are being used for what they're supposed to be used for, just like in any DeFi app today. But also then you can have privacy where, as an individual user, you don't know, someone's balance. You don't know necessarily what they're doing on chain. You have some ability of privacy the same way that you would with your bank account. And the end vision isn't that like, hey, this is just some standalone L2 where you come for privacy. The end vision is that this would be a hub for privacy for the entire global financial market, that like, you know, Aztec would continue to expand and be this place where people go to do things privately or to build privacy-enabled apps, and this whole new world of use cases that are really hard and difficult to imagine today because we don't have that today, so we don't really know maybe the ideas that you could have. But in the future, it could enable things not only like to replicate what we have in the real world, but actually improve on and build things that it would be impossible without things like zero knowledge in the real world, to create things, you know, kind of like the internet created things at first that were just replicas of, you know, the normal things we had, like, you know, here's news, but on the internet, here's magazines, but on the internet, and have slowly evolved into building things that we'd never had before. That's the overall scope and vision of something like Aztec.
You nailed it, Jesse. That is exactly the scope and vision of Aztec.
When will we see Aztec live?
When will we see Aztec live? Very good question. So we're going to hit testnet ideally second, 6 months into this year. But then we need to go to mainnet. And so you're going to see Aztec live in some form, likely very early next year. It's going to be a little bit of a longer road for us to get from testnet to mainnet, just because I think it's the world's most advanced cryptography protocol ever, and it's going to take a little bit of time for us to make sure to gain confidence it's secure and that people's funds aren't at risk. So you're going to see stages of like incentivized testnets to like, you know, partial mainnets, but eventually you'll basically be able to use Aztec live in a semi-production setting, you know, in the first quarter of next year if everything goes to plan.
I'm sure you maybe not even think about this at this point, but do you guys have any plans for a token, or is that something you guys are looking at in the future?
There's a strong rationale for issuing a token, but I can neither confirm nor deny whether we are going to do one.
Yeah, I figure that's what you say. A lot of people say that with a lot of projects, but I always get to the point of like, how do you have something decentralized without ultimately issuing a token? It does get pretty difficult to like do things like governance.
The problem with governance today on chain is that you have two choices: you have autocracy or you have plutocracy. You know, either you have a multi-sig where the multi-sig says what happens, or it's based on wealth. You have a vote, but the more wealth you have, the more the protocol you have, the more votes you have. And there's a reason why we don't like those systems in the real world. It's because they're bad. It's because the actual interests of individuals gets completely subjugated. And so there's two threads here. One is why does token voting suck, and how can you prove, and like, what does it mean? What are we going to do with Aztec? And then there's B, how do you make governance better on chain? These are two completely different paths that we can walk down. So to answer your original question, we're likely going to be doing governance via more of an Ethereum Foundation model, so hard forks basically, instead of having token votes, because we don't want we don't want plutocracy. We don't want to combine economic incentives with governance incentives, because they're not aligned. So why would you do that? That's bad. In terms of how to make governance better longer term, there's a reason why kind of Web3 has not crawled up the tech tree, so to speak, beyond plutocracy and autocracy, and that's because we don't have proper proofs of personhood. As in, you can't have a one person, one vote thing system in a blockchain platform, because who is a person? You know, I can make as many Ethereum accounts as I want, and ZK again is the solution for this. You're starting to see like a very top-down approach from WorldCoin, but in my opinion, what's going to win longer term are the bottom-up approaches, where you have holistic identity solutions from the real world that you use to create almost like an identity mesh. You know, where you can say, okay, have you got a passport? Have you got bank cards? Have you got bank statements? Do you have even looser things like, do you have a Google account? Do you have an Apple account? What's your Spotify? What's your Twitter handle? Once you have these trustless oracles into Web3, you can start to do that kind of stuff and meaningfully have an understanding that, yes, this account is a unique person. And once you have that, then you can actually innovate when it comes to governance and go far beyond plutocracy to more inclusive forms of governance.
Yeah, I can see it. As soon as you said the Ethereum Foundation, I was like, oh yeah, duh. There's a lot of people that are doing something like that or a model similar to that. And you're right, just pure voting like via token has some really big drawbacks. And we do need kind of an overhaul of governance. And yeah, maybe you're right that the tech's just not there yet, and we need to figure that out. But I think people get confused about why we even need governance and why are all these things just companies. But I think a lot of value from blockchains or these things comes from the fact that they are these commodities and there are these kind of like credibly neutral environments. And I think that is really, really important because like how many builders are building on Facebook? Now, not a lot or any because it's not credibly neutral. They could shut you down at any point. But how many people are building on the internet?
Yeah,
a lot of people build
exactly.
On the internet, so
absolutely, that's the core of it. I mean, one could argue that on like decentralized governance structures, they're kind of the modern reincarnation of a worker cooperative, because, well, not the plutocratic versions, but at least with governance structures like the Ethereum Foundation, which I think you'll be able to more accurately replicate on chain via tokens if you have proofs of personhood. In order to change things, you need the alignment of all the stakeholders. You need the node developers. You need application developers to make sure that nothing's gonna break their apps. You need consent from users, and you have the Ethereum Foundation coordinating this all but not controlling it. The people who really have a say are the stakeholders in the network, the people who are actually generating the value, building the applications. I think it is fiercely egalitarian. Also, why it's so damn hard to coordinate upgrades on Ethereum, but it's worth it. And I think the growth of Ethereum justifies the approach.
Are there any other teams maybe in the space that get you excited that are making strides forward when it comes to privacy or ZK or etc.?
Yes, there are. It's one of these things where, like, as somebody who cares a great deal about privacy, I'm excited by their successes. As the CEO of a privacy protocol, I'm a little less excited. So there's a tension there. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, there's several teams building similar systems to us, where they're like the concept program of privacy. The three that come to mind are Polygon Maiden, the Alio, and Neptune. I think those are the only ones that are trying to create the concept of a private smart contract. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anybody. And then you obviously have the OGs of Zcash or Monero, but they're on their own track. They're less focused on the concept of a smart contract.
Yeah, it seems to happen. You have like the original protocols that come along, they work really hard, then they make a ton of money, and then they get a little bit lazy, and they're like, oh, cool, we figured it out. We don't really need to push for it anymore. And you have new teams come out. I just noticed that's a trend in the space where it's like these newer teams that they don't even have a head start. They don't have the same head start or funding as some of these older teams, and they're able to run circles around them. We haven't quite hit that level in the crypto space where anyone's been building moats very, very well, in the sense that like the head start seems to mean anything, except for with things like maybe big network effects like Ethereum, Bitcoin, etc.
Yes, it is. I mean, as a protocol engineer, as the founder of Aztec, it is mildly concerning. It's just part of the risks of being an early wave, early adopter. Basically the first mover, you get an advantage because you get to grow a network, grow users before other systems come online. But also, you've done all the hard work. Like you've poured all the sweat and blood into solving the problem, and then people who come down the line, they can just be like, oh, it's open source.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
I mean, it's rich of me to complain about this because we wouldn't be here if it weren't for Zcash.
True.
We're all. It's a very interesting relationship. We're all building on each other's shoulders, and in theory, we're competitors. But I think we're fortunate enough that today that we're so early stage that it doesn't have to be seen in that light. As in, right now, the market for Web3 users that care about privacy is not worth anything. It's a rounding error.
Yeah.
It's like it's chump change. That's not the market. The market is bringing off-chain activities on-chain through privacy, making Web2 applications, like adding value to them by giving them access to a privacy network on Web3, by getting TradFi primitives into Web3, by growing the pie effectively. So we're all focused on growing the pie, and we're all fighting for pieces of the pie. But right now, like, the pie is so small, no one cares about the pieces. We're all just trying to grow it. So at the moment, right for now, it's very it's very collaborative, and I really cherish that.
Yeah, I think the pie is really small. I think there's a lot of room to grow, especially with like users in Web3. It's surprising to me sometimes when I look at like these huge protocols and the amount of actual users using that it is really, really small. And so there's a lot of room for everyone to grow the pie. And once we have useful things that people are using in their everyday lives, we've seen that blow up. I've seen niche things in the Web3 space with like some fitness stuff where they'll get, there's this one that nobody talks about. They like it's open source or open Wi-Fi networks, kind of like what Helium was doing, but with Wi-Fi. They have like 140 million users. They're Web3, Web3 app. And it's crazy. We don't talk about those, but like, I think one day we're going to see, over the next 10 years, we're going to see that in the crypto space. And privacy seems like that's a really great place to build some consumer-facing apps that would make a lot of sense. Or some like crypto banks, but like on-chain actual crypto banks. I can't wait. I can't wait till I can close my bank account and be like, boom, I'm doing everything on-chain. It's super easy. It's just as convenient. We aren't there yet, but I think we're
close.
We're
close. We're working as hard as we can.
What are you most excited about moving forward over the next few months with Aztec?
What am I most excited about? Well, I mean, internally, we're next week we're getting the gang together in London. We're going to do a big engineering offsite to do a big push to get this testnet project off the ground, and I'm excited to get it shipped. It's going to be it's going to be I can't say when because in this industry there's so many unknown unknowns. There's so much research that you see, like it's almost like a curse to give a date. But I'm hopeful we can get that out in 6 months. 5 months. But yeah, I'm excited for the testnet. I'm excited to show the world what can be done with Aztec. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Well, as always, none of this was investment advice. None of this was me, telling you to buy anything or not buy. We didn't really even talk about anything. But if you've interpreted it that way, that wasn't what we're saying. What's the easiest way for people to like maybe follow along with Aztec or follow you or any of that?
Yeah, follow our Twitter. If you want, we have a Discord for developers. So I should probably give some actual. Is it even worth like speaking out like Twitter and Discord links over on a podcast? But like if you search for Aztec Discord, if you search for Aztec Twitter, you'll find us. Search for Aztec GitHub if you want to tinker with the code. Go to Noirlang if you want to tinker around with privacy preserving programs. Those are the places you can find us.
Awesome. Well, it's been great talking with you, Zac, and
likewise.
Yeah.